It's always worthwhile going back to the question of the anti-dominance relationship to the future, given that this is one of the more enduring personality mythologies that surround the anti-dominance. When I say personality mythology, I don't necessarily mean that it's bad, that it's negative, that it's pejorative, that it's made up. I just mean that there's a mythology around it, right? Neutrally speaking. But of course, this mythology says a lot. We now have more tools after all the videos I've been releasing lately about more depth psychology stuff, because that's what we've been doing. What we have been doing in the last few months, what will be very apparent in my next book, is that we've been doing depth psychology of personality. Depth psychology of personality is exactly what we've been doing. And if you feel like this is not something that you see very much in other approaches, the only conclusion, very obviously, is that what other people are doing might be very good, might be very interesting, might be very insightful. It's not depth psychology of personality. And that's okay, but that's what we're doing now. And we're going to be doing this for a while, a long while probably. Now, so anti-dominance relationship to the future. It is incorrect to say that anti-dominance can predict what will happen. And I feel like this doesn't really have to be argued anymore. It's just really obvious. Like regarding to something that factually is going to take place in the future, an event, a localized event or a network of events that will become facts. The anti-dominant doesn't have any more power to predict it than someone of another type. All right. In fact, we could even go so far as to imagine that perhaps they have a less power than, say, some extroverted intuitives who are able to gather consciously lots of information, SG dominance too, about the current situation, to be able to at least create models that give them scenarios as to what may happen in the future. And building these models and these scenarios, it seems very much of an NETI thing, in my opinion. Sometimes maybe an NETE thing, you know, but not an introverted intuitive thing. The relationship with the future that you see displayed, that you see expressed, exhibited in the anti-dominance life, behavior, way of being, is what I would describe nowadays as a narratively driven relationship to the future, as a thematically driven relationship with the future. You know, in my NI notes, I say, and I like this phrase, that the anti-dominant is in no particular position, certainly not privileged position, to predict what will happen. But they seem to be keenly insightful when it comes to capturing what the future holds, the spirit of the age. The spirit of the age in the present, but on the basis of being able to capture the spirit of the age, being able to divine, if you like, foretell what the future holds. But notice that in the phrase "what the future holds," I don't mean what will in fact happen. I mean what the future holds in terms of its major narratives, in terms of its overarching themes. This is something that you see very clearly on display in the works of Jung. Jung is always predicting that something terrible is likely to happen to Europe, and World War II happens. Marx, another anti-dominant INTJ in this case, of course famously made predictions, right, that are false if you take them as factual, but in terms of themes, they're quite accurate. Nietzsche, of course, was full of these thematic, narratively driven statements about the future. Taking the pulse of the age and talking about the future and what the future holds thematically, narratively, is what the anti-dominant does. Now, before I continue and explain to you what I think is going on in terms of depth psychology, don't forget, guys, that you can support me on Patreon, and that there's a link to my Patreon below. I'd be so grateful if you did support me to keep this channel going. Cannot do this without you. You get access to a whole library of deep dive content, exclusive content for patrons, and the Discord server, the Fourfold. So that's a great time. Please consider it. Link is below. So to continue, I think, and now we're moving into depth psychology, that the reason why there is this this keenness, this acuteness of insight when it comes to what the future holds and why it has a narrative kind of structure, well, it's because we saw in a recent video that the NI relationship to the unconscious is one of keen sensitivity, and that I think it can be explained by the fact that the, if you like, the partition between the collective unconscious and the personal unconscious is more porous in the case of NI dominance. But if it's more porous, what it means is that the archetypal forces drip into the personal unconscious in slightly larger drops, not like a wave, that would be psychosis, but larger drops, which means that they filter into the unconscious fantasies PH, with more prominence than in the case of your average non-NI dominant. Now, the fantasies PH are, of course, the source of the fantasies F in conscious life. The less access you have to your unconscious because you're repressed or for other reasons, the more impoverished your fantasies with an F. The more rich, the more open you are to the world of unconscious fantasy, which is always rich itself because it's already in the unconscious, the more diverse and rich and alive and colorful and textured your fantasies with an F will be. Fantasies with an F are, if you like, the material, the nourishment of creative thinking. This creative thinking is the basis of conscious thinking about the future, including the thematic future. But because ultimately the influence is the archetypal forces in unconscious fantasy, and unconscious fantasies have a narrative structure, what ends up making its way into consciousness via fantasies with an F are also narrative. The last piece of the puzzle is, why is it the archetypes that explain collective unconscious, that explains best this proclivity for future prediction? Well, because the archetypes, as Jung explains, are best understood as the forms of all possible experiences on the basis of past experiences, millions of years of experience inherited and condensed into these living images called the archetypes. If these become more accessible to consciousness via fantasies with an F, in the conscious fantasies with an F of the creative NI thinker, there'll be more access to the prediction of these themes. Explained narratively, because it was all narrative from the start. Guys, if you want to hear more about NI and about INFJs, don't forget I've written 2 books on the topic. The Ecstatic Soul, which is all about the INFJ's internal world, a new look at the INFJ personality. The Infinite Soul, INFJ Life in the Modern World, which is all about, well, this INFJ has this mind and this personality. What are they like in the world, and how can they find purpose, value, and meaning? Because the world is often felt by them as hostile. For a deep understanding of the type, you need to have these books in your possession and to read them. Waiting for the NI book. The links are below to both books. I thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.